Hi there. Okay, so we are going to be talking about lab safety, and this is going to take you through all the different parts of the booklet. Feel free to stop and pause at any time as I'm going to ask you to in order to go and do some of the other activities to try them out. Okay, here we go. Let's get started. Okay, lab safety in the classroom. What is WHMIS? Okay, what does WHMIS stand for? Hopefully, you've heard this before. The W is workplace. The H is hazardous, the M is materials, the I is information, and the S is system. Now, if you took science with me in grade 9, some of this will be familiar, but I have changed it up. So be prepared. There are some new things coming. Okay. It is a federal, so that's all of Canada, legislation that covers the use of hazardous materials in the workplace. And for us, the workplace is school. Okay. Each province then had to develop its own laws. Okay, and in Manitoba, it's called the Hazardous Products Act. And what does it do? Well, it regulates hazardous materials sold in Canada. So there are three types of products that it regulates. One are things that are prohibited. Okay, so prohibited, and I'm writing along just with you, are not allowed to be sold in Canada. Okay, the next one is restricted. Okay, and this can be sold to the general public. It's what you find when you go to the grocery store. Okay, anybody can buy it. Okay, and then the last one is controlled products. Okay, and those are things that are used in the workplace or school. Ah, there we go. If I write along with you, then I can't go nearly as fast. Okay, all good. Next one. WHMIS requires that all substances have a few things. One is that it's classified. Okay, so there are all these different classifications and they all go along with symbols and they're all lettered. So they all have to fall into one classification. Okay, then they have to be labeled. Okay, we got to know what we're working with. It has to have an MSDS, but I think now they call it an SDS. So if you say MSDS, it's fine. If you say SDS, it's fine. Okay, and it needs to educate us on how to use it. Okay, now what doesn't fall under WHMIS? Okay, so there's a few things here, okay? Things like explosives and cosmetics. So if you think every time you went to go pick up chapstick in the winter, it came with a 8 by 11 piece of paper that told you all the dangerous things about it. No. Okay, so cosmetics, food and medications. If you've ever gotten a prescription, right, you'll see it comes with a bunch of information with it. Excellent. Okay, that's what that's going for. Okay, pesticides and tobacco products. Okay, And why? Why are there exceptions? Well, because they're covered under other regulatory laws. Other government sectors are taking care of those things. Okay, so what I want you to do now is pause, go back to Google Classroom, and watch Spencer's story on Edpuzzle. Okay, let's take a look at what an SDS is all about. Okay, so what exactly is it? Okay, it's a required document that contains information about a controlled product. Okay, so let's write that down. A required document that contains information about a controlled product. And remember when we said controlled product, that's stuff that we use in the workplace, okay? And what does it stand for? Okay, SDS, Safety Data Sheet. I'm not sure why they dropped the M, which just meant material, because that's literally what it is, but that's totally okay. Safety Data Sheet. And I will often say SDS sheet, even though the last S is the sheet, but that's okay. Okay, so depending on the supplier, an SDS can be set up in different ways, but it all covers the same information. If you're with me in grade 9, we took a look at aluminum. We took a look at aluminum. And here we're going to take a look at the SDS for the sanitizer that we use in the classroom. Okay, now what kind of information does it have to cover? Okay, so it tells us a few things. One, it tells us product information. Okay, it also tells us the hazardous ingredients. The physical data, it's like melting point, boiling point, what does it look like? Okay, fire and explosion data. Reactivity data, so what does it react with? Toxicological properties. So what about it makes it toxic? Okay, preventative measures. Okay, how do we avoid getting sick or avoid having an accident? Okay, first aid measures. What do we do if we do have an accident? And then who prepared it? Okay. And that way, if someone got sick from a specific chemical that was used at a specific time, like say at our school this year, but they didn't get sick for 15, 20 years, they can come back. We'd look up this SDS sheet. There we go again, SDS, and we'd find who the supplier was so we could contact them and then figure out what needed to happen. Right? And we have to hold on to them for a long time. I think it's 30 years. Okay, so where can you find the SDS sheets at the SRSS? Okay, they're in a red binder in the prep area by the fume hood. So if you go to the back of the classroom, through the door, and turn left, on the other side of the fume hood is a big red binder, and it has all of them alphabetized. Okay. So let's take a look at an example. Okay. So in your booklet there, I gave you the safety data sheet for, it's called Oxivir, which is the green bottle that we have in the classroom that we use to clean our tables. Smells really nice, and that's what we're using. So I thought, hey, maybe we should get comfortable with looking at the SDS for that's something that we're going to use all the time. Okay, so you'll see that this one is laid out a little bit different. It's not everything in those same 9 topics, but it still has all the information in here. Okay, so the very first section here is product information, gives us the name. Okay, it tells us the SDS number. Okay, so you can actually just Google this. Let me highlight that. Yep, and it'll pull this up. Okay, tells you what it's used for. Okay. Oh, and look, here is the manufacturer. Okay. Um, here's next section says hazards identification. Okay. What about this is hazardous? Well, it says it's not classified as hazardous. Okay, so that's good to know, especially seeing as we use it on our tables and then we eat off of our tables. Next, it says what is it made up of? Okay, what's its composition? Okay, so here are all the ingredients: benzyl alcohol, hydrogen peroxide. Okay, and I can't pronounce that one on the fly. Okay, but if you think about it, hydrogen peroxide we know we use to clean cuts and wounds and stuff, so that kind of makes sense. First aid measures. Okay, what do we do if we have an accident with it? Okay, tells us what to do with our eyes and our skin. What happens if we inhale it? Okay, what happens if we drink it? Okay, um, and it gives some other information. And obviously, it doesn't look like it's a very dangerous product to be using, which is good. Okay, firefighting measures. Okay, what happens if it's on fire? Okay, so how do we extinguish it? And here it tells us the product is not flammable. Okay, extinguish fire using agents suitable for the surrounding fire. So it's obviously going to be something else around it that's on fire, not this product. Okay, um, accidental release measures. Okay, so what happens if you, I don't know, if you accidentally sprayed the bottle and you didn't mean to? Um, it talks about here cleaning up methods. If it's a large spill, absorb the spill with inert material like dry sand or earth. Okay, and we have that in our lab prep area underneath the sink. We have a bunch of different sands in order to clean up chemical spills. Okay, handling and storage. Where should we keep it? Okay, it says keep it in a tightly closed, in a dry, cool, and well ventilated place. Well, it's on our counter, and that pretty much covers all of those things. That's good. Number 8 says exposure and controls. Okay, so it looks like the big ingredient here that you have to be more careful with is the hydrogen peroxide. Okay, so it talks about the PPE equipment and what we would need when working with this. Physical and chemical properties. Okay, so here it tells us what the color of it is. Okay, um, does it have a flash point? It says between 93 degrees and 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, is it flammable? It says not applicable. Look at this here. It says odor cherry almond. Ha! Now I know why it smells so good. I'm like, why does the tables always smell so good when I use this? Okay, so it gives some other information here as well. What's the pH? Okay, so it's acidic, which makes sense, right? We want it to clean and disinfect. How stable is it? How reactive is it? Okay, um, so it lists that information here. It says the product is stable. It's not really going to break down into anything dangerous. Okay. What should you not mix it with? Okay. This says not to mix it with any other product or chemicals unless specified. Toxicological information. How are we likely to get sick? Well, it might get contact with our skin, breathe it in, or in our eyes. Okay. What are the effects from chronic or short-term exposure? Okay, so it talks here about are we gonna have any issue with our skin? It says unlikely to be an irritant. Okay, might be mildly irritating to our eyes. Um, Otherwise, no known side effects for some of these other ones. Okay, ecological information. I thought this was interesting. How toxic is it to our environment? Okay, and you can see it says no information available, and maybe that's just because it hasn't been tested yet, which would be my guess. Okay. And in grade 10, when we talk about in ecology, bioaccumulation, that's where how much of a chemical builds up as it gets eaten by larger and larger prey. And so we'll come back to that. Okay. Disposal considerations. How should you dispose of this? It says do not contaminate water, food, or feed by storage or disposal. Okay. What else? Look at the label, look at the label. Transport information, regulatory information. So here's our Canadian regulations. Okay, anything else we need to know? Here are some other scales for the National Fire Prevention Association. And who prepared it? North American Regulatory Affairs. Okay, there you go. So that is an example of an MSDS or an SDS. Okay, they all look a little bit different. Hopefully, they're not all 5, 6 pages. I like them when they're all on one page, but it lets you see all the information you need. Okay. So now what I'd like you to do is go to Google Classroom and watch Barry's story on Edpuzzle. And then you're going to go to back to Google Classroom and find the questions for the SDS. There's an SDS activity there that I want you to try. Okay, it's in your booklet, and I just want you to fill in your answers online. Okay. Okay, next up is identifying laboratory hazards. So let me get that up. And you'll see that there's in your notes, there's two different there's 8 rows, but then there's 2 big boxes. Okay, so the top box is talking about health hazards. So hazards come in 2 forms: health hazards, which might take time to show an impact, and safety hazards, which can cause bodily injury or property damage, which is often immediate on impact. Okay, so I just kind of made the border a bit stronger so we could group them side by side. Okay. So science labs become safer places when you know what the potential hazards are, okay, how to protect yourself, and what to do in case of an emergency. Okay. So the first type of health hazard is a chemical hazard. Okay. So this includes any sort of chemical. Okay, compressed gas, solvents, and lead. Okay, and how can we reduce the risk? Okay, we want to wear our appropriate PPE. So in the classroom, that would be our goggles and our gloves, and sometimes our apron, depending on what we're doing. Okay, if we can, use a less toxic chemical. Okay, and store chemicals in the fume hood. Okay. Okay, so we have a fume hood that we can put things in if they're going to give off a strong smell, or if there might be a potential for an accident. And we also have specific cupboards for acids and our bases and for those things that are flammable. And then everything else is being stored properly in the back as well. Okay, next one is physical hazards. Okay, so this is things like noise, vibrations, heat, cold, radiation. Okay, and how can we reduce the risk? Okay, let's isolate that hazard if we can. Okay, use soundproof barriers to reduce noise levels. And I guess maybe more realistically for us, that's using earplugs. Okay, limit our exposure. That definitely makes a big deal. Okay, and where are the PPE that we need to? But it's like you'll see wear PPE for pretty much all of them, but it's not always just about that. You want to be able to do other things to mitigate it so you're not trying to rely just on your goggles or your gloves or your earplugs to help you out. Okay, and if we have moving machinery, we can isolate it with guards around or just to make it more safe. My husband works at West Steel and he does all the machinery to get grain bins built. And all the robotics, everything has huge fencing around it and guardrails to make sure that nobody comes too close or nobody falls in and then gets to hurt. Okay. The next one is ergonomic. Okay. So, what's an example of this? The design of your workplace. Okay, jobs that involve a lot of repetition, doing the same thing over and over and over again, force or posture if you're having to sit for long periods of time. Okay, and how can we reduce the risk? Okay, um, use trolleys and carts to move things around. Okay, limit your exposure to your risk. So if the risk is having to stay seated for a long time, maybe you have a standing desk or you take frequent breaks, like that kind of a thing. Okay, and design workspaces to best support your health. Okay, so if that means you need something under your feet or you need to have something behind your back in order to support you, then that's what we need to do. Okay. When I worked at Manitoba Hydro, we had guards in front of our computer screens to help limit the light and the effect on our eyes. We had special things that went underneath our feet so that um, our posture was better and better seats. And they had occupational therapists who would come in all the time because we did so much data entry that people got hand cramps, right? You're always holding a mouse and talking on the phone and working on the computer. So once they recognized that this was an issue, they brought people in to try and mitigate the, the problem. Okay, biological. That's the last one. That's a health hazard. Okay, so what are some examples? So organisms or toxic substances produced by living things that can cause illnesses in humans. Okay, so organisms or toxic substances. And you can abbreviate however you want. Okay. Okay, so things like bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites, insects. So there I have like an arrow that points to the virus, at least that's what's supposed to. Think about COVID-19, right? That's a virus that causes an illness to us, right? And insects, think like bee stings and spider bites, that kind of stuff, right? Trying to write so fast. Okay, so how can we reduce the risk? Okay, so we can wear PPE when we need to, right? And right now, that's what we do. We all wear masks, right? If we can't be more than 2 meters or 6 feet away from somebody, we're wearing masks, right? Follow our directions and guidelines to prevent exposure. Okay, so if you're outside and you're camping, if you want to reduce the risks of bacteria or insect bites, you're going to wear repellent, okay? Or you're going to wear long clothes with light colors, okay? I went too fast for myself. Okay, so those four make up health hazards, okay? So those are things that can take time to have an impact, to show an impact, okay? And then the next four are ones that are safety hazards that can cause bodily injury, right, or property damage. Okay, so the first one for that one is machine hazards. Okay, so this is things like anything that has a moving part, okay, belts, pulleys, blades, saws. Okay, um, and how do we reduce the risk? Okay, we're going to keep our long hair tied up. We're going to wear the correct PPE, snug clothing. Okay, never put your hand near a moving part, which might seem like something you don't really need to say, but you never know. Place guards around moving parts. In carpentry, they have tape on the floor that maps out where you can go and where you can stand to be safe from the equipment that you're working with. Okay, look for safety switches. You should know how you can immediately shut something off. In class, if we were doing a lab and say we were using fire, and all of a sudden there was an issue, we needed to squash that really quickly, we can go and push the black and red button at the back of the room, and that's the safety switch to shut the gas off. Okay, so you should know if you're working with something how you can shut it off. Okay, sorry. Okay, next one are energy hazards. Okay, so those are things like steam, heat, electricity. And how are we going to reduce the risk, right? Don't use things that have frayed wires. I'm trying to keep the risk part as relevant to what we're doing, okay? These hazards are the most updated ones from Manitoba Health and Safety, okay? Know where your panel box is? So you can shut off the electricity if you need to, okay? Operate machinery properly. Whoops, sorry. Okay. The third one is called handling materials hazards. So what does that kind of include? Lifting things manually or mechanically. Okay, and how are we going to reduce the risk? Well, let's redistribute the weight to smaller packages so it's easier to handle. If you can. Okay, use a cart or trolley. Okay, we have a whole bunch of carts that we use to move everything for science, all our microscopes, our textbooks. You see the custodians when they're moving all the tables around, when we had to do all the reconfigurations of the classrooms, they had these kind of accordion trolleys that would lift up and lift a table up a little bit higher, and then they could pull it out, and then that way they're not having to constantly be lifting the tables all the time. Okay. And the last one is work practices. Okay, so what kind of example is this? Literally working unsafely. Okay, either because you're not following the rules or because the correct rules haven't been put in place. Okay, and how can we reduce the risk? If you don't know, ask. Okay, ask questions. If you see something and it doesn't look safe, ask somebody, hey, is that supposed to be the way it's supposed to be? If you see something, say something. If we know what the rules are and someone's not following them in class, say something, right? It's not only just for your safety, but for everybody else's, right? And for us really right now that comes into play is wearing our masks all the time, right? When we're going to be in contact with each other, we want to make sure we're wearing our masks so that we are working safely. Okay, so that is the different kinds of hazards that are now classified in Manitoba. So what I'd like you to do is in your booklet, there's a little activity that says identify the hazard. I've listed a few different hazards, and then I want you to tell me which type it would be: chemical, physical, ergonomic, biological, machine, energy, handling materials, or work practices. Then take your answers and pop them into the Google Doc that I put on, pop them into the form that I put on Google Classroom. Okay. And then the very last thing we're going to do is hazardous symbols for restricted consumer products. So I like this. Give me 2 seconds here. Ah, I lost my pen. Okay, so this is the last section. I can't tell you which page number is it, but that's okay. Restricted consumer products are hazardous. Okay, so remember, restricted products are still things that you and I buy at the store all the time, right? And a consumer product is something you use at home. Do you use it at home? It's a consumer product. Okay. If a product is used in the workplace, WHMIS is applied. So at home, you might use Windex to clean your glass. No big deal. When we use it in school, well, then we have to apply WHMIS. So they have specific bottles that have labels pre-inked on them, and then we go to a giant place to get them filled. Okay, so not having to put labels on more and more spray bottles all the time. That's just an example. Okay, do you have to use WHMIS on consumer products used at home? No. Okay, we don't have to use it when we're doing it at home, but do we have to use it on consumer products used in the workplace? Yes. So that answers those 2 questions. Sorry, I skipped the shapes there. Now, what do those shapes mean? I'm sure you've seen them before, probably on stuff in your bathroom or under the sink or in the laundry room. Okay, so that upside down triangle means caution. Just like the yield when you're driving and you see it on the road and you want to know that you have to you have to be careful, right? Because there might be another car coming in the opposite direction. Okay, the diamond means warning, and the octagon means danger. Just like the stop sign, right? Careful. Stop fully and see what's coming at you. And inside those shapes are 4 other pictures that come. Okay, so the first one means poison. Oops, sorry, I got a little bit faster there. And you can just label it underneath. The next one is flammable. And the next one is corrosive. That's supposed to be a hand that's been dipped in acid and it's eaten away the hand, and all you have left is the bones. And the next one means explosive, contents under pressure. Okay, so now it's your turn. So in your house, I want you to find 3 different objects that have one or multiple symbols on them. Okay, so explosive, poisonous, corrosive, or flammable. Okay, go back to Google Classroom and open up the hazardous household activity. These instructions are just on the next page of your notes. Okay, and you're going to complete it on ClassKick. Take a picture of each item, make sure you can see the symbols, and add it to the correct page. Fill in the table with as much information about the product as it offers. You can adjust the font sizes in the box to get what you need in. And then when you're done, raise the green check and hand it in so I know you're finished. Okay. And that is our lab safety booklet. Okay. There's going to be an assignment, a case study that's on Google Classroom, as well as there's going to be one more other video assignment I'm going to ask you to do, and I will post it on Google Classroom as well. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon. Let me know if you have any questions.